Hi, I'm Will Coghill-Behrends of the Professional Development Center in the TLC. Today I'm joined by Dr. Chris Morphew, DEO of EPLS, and we're going to talk about finding jobs that fit. Thanks, Chris, for joining us today. One of your academic specialties is this whole notion of fit, and finding the right place for the right person. Can you just begin the conversation by telling us a little bit about what you think of when you think of fit?
I think of several things. I mean, when I'm talking with students who are either getting ready to go on the job market, who are going on the job market, there's a number of factors. Teaching-focused institutions versus research-focused institutions, unionized faculty, non-unionized faculty. Do I want to be at a small place? Do I want to be at a large place? Public, private. Geography is also a consideration for lots of folks. I think the number one thing people talk about, though, is research-focused versus teaching-focused, right? Mm-hmm. So the question is, do I see myself as a teacher-scholar or as a scholar-teacher? And whichever word there comes first probably indicates at least from a starting point, what kind of institution you might be looking for. So if you see yourself as a scholar teacher, a researcher who teaches, but whose primary interest in a faculty position is as a researcher, then research universities are probably going to be more of a fit for you. If you see yourself as someone who is a teacher first, scholar second, whose scholarship and research supports their teaching, then a regional public institution that might be more focused on teaching, or even a smaller liberal arts college or a community college might make sense for you. Mm-hmm. Some folks also think about variables like unionized faculty. Research universities tend not to be unionized. Regional universities, community colleges tend to be unionized, and that changes the dynamic that surrounds the job, the context for doing the job. And
in which ways? Can you elaborate a little bit there?
Well, the reason that research universities typically aren't unionized is because faculty governance is central to the institution. The faculty are essentially the university at a place like the University of Iowa, Big Ten, a major research university. At an institution with a history of unionized faculty, you tend to have more of a managers of the institution and teachers in the institution. Mm-hmm. And that role, now this can be very different at different institutions, but in some cases there's a divide between management and the academics who do the teaching in the institution. And that changes your ability as a faculty member to have an impact on the way in which your department, your college, your institution is run. And it may in fact change the dynamic between you and your department chair, you and the provost, you and the vice president for student affairs, all sorts of things.
Very good, very good. Chris, unless somebody had an undergraduate experience at a liberal arts campus, for example, how will they even know what a liberal arts campus is like in terms of, culture, responsibilities, et cetera? Unless you've had that experience, how do you know what it might be like there as a faculty?
Well, I think it's a very good question. I think too often people at research universities don't even think about a liberal arts job. Mm-hmm. And in some ways, a liberal arts teaching job is the best job out there. And if you're at a well-resourced liberal arts college with really intellectually curious students and good resources to teach, and you've got a teaching load of 3 or something like that, that's a really good job. But you've got to consider that in the first place. And I think so. How do you figure out what that would be like for you? I think one of the things is talk to people who went to liberal arts colleges. Mm-hmm. That would be one thing to do. There are some books on the subject. That you could look at different, what does it mean to be a faculty member in different kinds of places. There's a great book that I use and have used in my courses called How Colleges Work that talks about different kinds of colleges and faculty life, in vignettes at these different kinds of colleges. And at liberal arts colleges, it's much more like you're a member of a family than at a research university where you're part of what this book would describe as an organized anarchy. But I would look at ads for jobs. The Chronicle of Higher Education, Inside Higher Education, all these places that put out jobs, and even a year or 2 years out before you've started to look for jobs, start taking a look at jobs. And if you see something that you think is interesting, click on the institution, and there'll be a longer position there, and start looking at what are the faculty that are like you in education in whatever field we're talking about, what are they doing with their time at the liberal arts college? Are they advising student groups? Are they doing research with undergraduates? What are the kinds of things that appeal to faculty members and the institutions that hire these faculty members, and then try to get some of those experiences. So if you think working at a liberal arts college might be in your future, sign up for a summer research project with with an undergraduate who come to the University of Iowa, and you would do a summer research project with them. Involve undergraduates in your research. Volunteer to teach a freshman seminar on campus. Do the kinds of things that you would be doing at a liberal arts college, and that will demonstrate to the search committee at the liberal arts college that you understand what it is they're trying to do that is different from a research university.
Well, for sure, and going the extra mile to seek out those additional opportunities.
But recognize that liberal arts colleges don't award PhDs, so the people they're hiring are coming from research universities, regional universities anyway. So they may or may not have the undergraduate liberal arts experience. But they are hiring people like you.
Good. We've talked about this notion of professional fit. Let's talk about some of the items that might be on the personal inventory or checklist in terms of figuring out, is this the right place for me?
And what kinds of, you want to suggest some things? Or
geography.
What? Okay.
The perhaps feel of the town. Is this a liberal hamlet? Is this a super ultra conservative place?
Right.
So what kinds of personal decisions or factors do you see? Maybe let's take this approach. Where do you see students often, forgetting to consider certain things?
I see students way too often limiting themselves geographically for reasons that sometimes I don't see. I don't see why, particularly if they're fresh PhDs in their late 20s, early 30s, and they don't have 3 children and a wife who's working or a husband who's working to support them, so that would require them staying in a certain area. And people think I'm not going to look outside the Midwest, or I'm not going to look. I got my PhD in California, and I remember talking with people who were from California who'd gone to Stanford, and we were thinking about our job search, and they were saying, I'm willing to go anywhere. Northern California, Southern California, I might even consider Arizona. And I was like, wow, that's limiting yourself.
Yeah.
I think too often people think if I take this job, I'm going to be there for the rest of my life. And that's certainly not the case. I've worked at 4 different institutions. Lots of people move around. So I would look for communities with that have the kinds of qualities you want to have. There are lots and lots and lots of universities. Some of which are located in great communities, some of which are located in not so great communities. I think community and quality of life should be a real consideration.
Yeah.
I would much rather work outside my geographical comfort zone in a nice community than stay in my geographical comfort zone and take a lesser job in a community that I wasn't as comfortable with.
Yeah, very good. We award PhDs to a considerable number of international students, and one anxiety that they always have is, will I be able to find work in the United States if I'm interested in staying? How does that fit into this whole idea, this whole notion of fit?
Well, I think if I was an international student and my number one goal was to get a job in the U.S. upon graduation, first of all, I wouldn't limit myself geographically.
Yeah.
Second of all, I would look very early on at the kinds of jobs that I wanted nationally, and I would get those skill sets. I would get the kinds of skills that make me a better commodity on the job market. If that means research skills, I would go after those skills hard. If that means publications, I would make sure I have those. I think it is, all of the things being equal, I think international students often, there is some concern, whether it's English skills or, that they're not a citizen or that they haven't lived here, visa issues, things like that, with search committees. And I think search committees probably many of them might have a bias against international students. So you have to make yourself into something that they can't afford to not hire.
Very good.
And that requires you thinking early and often about, where are the jobs in terms of skill sets and getting those skill sets. And if you have the right skills, and if you're not limiting yourself geographically, you should be able to get a job, especially when you're graduating from a place like this. I mean, you're graduating from a place with some real currency. You're not graduating from a place nobody's heard of or a place that people don't respect.
Yeah, very good. So you just touched on this issue a little bit, this notion of fit regarding, really marketing yourself so that search committees can't say no. Look, let's face it, finding a job that fit is really a two-way street, right? Search committees also are looking for that. So how do you convince your search committee that you fit, and what kinds of skills or personality dispositions are most search committees looking for?
Whenever I'm on an interview, when I get back, I always comment to my wife that I'm very, very tired, because I always say the same. I figured it out after the first couple interviews, and it's very draining trying not to be myself for 2 days. Right.
Sure.
But I am of the opinion that your number one job when you're on an interview is to get the offer. Okay. I do believe it's a two-way street, but you're part of that two-way street in terms of your saying no to the job occur after you get the offer. Okay. So your job when you're on campus should be to get the offer, and that actually starts before you get to campus. In this day and age of the internet and information overload, there's no reason why you shouldn't come to campus knowing virtually everything about the institution, the college, the department, the faculty in the department. I would stop just short of scary stalking when it comes to gathering information and using that information in a pro-social way. But you should absolutely have done your homework. Folks who come in and ask sort of basic questions about the department and the college, to me, that's a red flag right away. What are you can't take a couple hours before you get on the plane and check out the institution? I don't understand that. So I would make sure I understand what the institution is about. I would look at, have they recently revised their curriculum? Who have they recently hired? This will tell you a lot about what their values are. You can figure out from a department's website, if it's a good website, the kinds of things they value, the kinds of things they don't value, the kinds of people they value. And then your job is to make sure that they believe you're one of those people.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying go out and lie about yourself. I'm just saying emphasize the values that are most consistent with what they want to hire. And you're, of course, gathering information during the interview as well. And if you come back and they give you an offer and you didn't like the place, then say no.
Yeah.
But your first job is to get the offer.
That's really good
advice.
advice.
There's no better feeling in the world than somebody offering you a job and you saying no thanks, by the way. Right?
Sure,
to some degree, sort of knowing that you wouldn't be comfortable in that job and knowing that you did everything you were supposed to do and you got the offer, and then say, it's just not a good fit for me.
Not for me. Very good. Sometimes candidates, well, not everybody's after a tenure track job.
Sure.
Let's start
Sure.
this way. But let's say you are somebody who's looking for a tenure track job. It doesn't happen your first year on the job market. What do you do? How do you keep from letting the chips get you down, so to speak?
Well, I can tell you what you don't do. You don't use the next year that you aren't in a tenure track job to not publish. Particularly if you're going after a job at a research university, but even if you're going after a job at a regional university, keep yourself fresh. Go to conferences, figure out a way to go to the conference, figure out a way to write, figure out a way to get published. The danger in not getting an academic job your first year or two out is that there's going to be a gap. And the question is, what have you done with that gap? And you need to be demonstrating that even though you weren't in the job, you were doing what you would have done had you gotten that job.
And one can adjunct,
absolutely,
visiting,
absolutely, and
faculty,
I would encourage those things,
yeah.
particularly if you're looking for a teaching first job.
Sure.
And you have to do those things.
Yeah.
If you're looking for a research first job, like a research university job, then I think you should absolutely be publishing. But getting an adjunct job and keeping your teaching fresh is important as well.
There's been a lot of discussion, not so much recently, but in the past about certain faculty shortage areas, and how that might overhype or make somebody perhaps feel over entitled to a job. What is your thought on, this notion of faculty shortage? Are there any areas where such a thing exists?
I think there are now, but I think these forecasts of faculty shortages are notoriously bad.
Yeah.
I mean, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I guess almost 15 years ago when I was getting my PhD, 16 years ago when I was getting my PhD, they were forecasting these huge shortages, and all the baby boomers were going to retire. Well, what they didn't forecast was that the baby boomers TIAA CREF accounts were going to take a nosedive.
Sure.
And I'm sure that's kept thousands, tens of thousands of faculty from retiring if they just can't afford it at this point. And also what they didn't forecast is the number of adjuncts that are being hired to replace tenure track lines. So these forecasts are, to my way of thinking, notoriously bad. But there are certainly some areas now that people who have a better knowledge base of this than I do tell me there are shortages in science education, math education, certainly. Those are areas. In higher education right now, in educational leadership, 2 areas in my department, there are a ton of jobs. I've been shocked at the number of jobs this year. In what is, the economy hasn't turned around yet. And I'll bet you I've seen postings for 25, 30 good educational leadership jobs, and maybe 30 or 40 higher education jobs. Higher education is a small field. Educational leadership is a bigger area, but there aren't that many tenure track jobs historically in ed leadership. So, there are jobs to be had, and if you're willing to, look broadly, if you're willing to, take a job in Lubbock, then you're going to be you're more likely to be successful.
Very good.
Not that there's anything wrong with Lubbock.
Not at all. Chris, it's been great talking to you about finding jobs that fit. Any capstone advice for our graduates?
No, I think the best thing you can do is figure out early on what kind of job you want, and then get the skills that people are asking for. What is that search committee asking for? Get those skills.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Chris.